My father said he couldn't afford to take me on vacation. Then I saw my brother's kids in first class. The day Mom died, something in Dad changed. The light in his eyes dimmed, like someone had flipped a switch. I was 22, fresh out of college. Ryan, my older brother, was already married with twin toddlers, living 3 states away with a job that kept him too busy to come home except for Christmas and Mom's funeral. "I don't know how I'm going to make it, Ellie," Dad said that night, his voice cracking as we sat surrounded by casserole dishes from neighbors. "The medical bills, your mother's treatments. I didn't want to worry either of you, but we remortgaged the house." I squeezed his hand. "I'll help you, Dad. Whatever you need." That was the beginning of what would become my life for the next 7 years. I declined my dream job in Boston and took a lower-paying position in our hometown. Just until he gets back on his feet, I told myself. That day never came. Ryan called. Dad would say over dinner, circles under his eyes growing darker. "The twins need braces. He's really struggling, but I can't help him. Not with the way things are." I'd nod, understanding the unspoken request. The next day, I'd send Ryan money I'd been saving for a weekend trip. It was fine. I could always go another time. When my car broke down, I started taking the bus. When friends invited me on their annual beach trip, I invented excuses. The truth that I couldn't afford it after paying Dad's property taxes was too embarrassing to admit. Every month, Dad would shuffle into the kitchen, bills clutched in trembling hands, laying them on the table like tarot cards foretelling doom. "I don't know how I'm going to make these payments," he'd say, voice quivering. "The pension isn't stretching like it used to." And every month, I'd transfer money from my account to his, watching my savings dwindle. I picked up freelance work on nights and weekends. I sold my mother's jewelry, the pieces she'd left to me, telling myself she would have wanted me to help Dad. "You're an angel," he'd tell me. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Ryan's got his hands full with those kids and that mortgage. It's not fair to ask him for help. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my father. On my 30th birthday, Dad confronted me about the leaking roof. The estimate he showed me made my stomach drop. "Dad, I don't have this kind of money," I admitted, the words bitter in my mouth. His face fell with disappointment. "I understand. It's just..." Ryan called today too. "Emma's got a school trip to Europe. Educational opportunity of a lifetime." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. What kind of aunt was I if I wouldn't help give my niece opportunities? What kind of daughter was I if I couldn't fix my father's roof? I took out a personal loan the next day. The roof got fixed. Emma went to Europe. While scrolling through her Facebook photos of the Eiffel Tower, I ate ramen for the 5th night in a row, wondering how long it would take to pay off the loan. "You'll visit us soon, right?" Ryan would ask during infrequent calls. The kids barely know their aunt. "Soon," I'd promise. But plane tickets were expensive, and Dad had just mentioned property taxes again. By 32, I was exhausted. Friends had stopped inviting me out. Dating was forgotten. Who had time or money for romance when there were always more bills? My boss had started giving concerned looks when I fell asleep at my desk. "You should take a vacation," she suggested. "You've got weeks of unused time." That night, I actually considered it. Maybe a weekend trip. Something small. "Dad," I said over Sunday dinner, "I was thinking of taking a few days off. Maybe visit the Grand Canyon." He looked up surprised. "A vacation? Now?" "Just a long weekend," I clarified quickly. His expression shifted to one I recognized, disappointment tinged with martyrdom. "Well, I suppose you've earned it. It's just..." He reached for his phone. "Ryan sent me these today." Photos of the twins, looking glum in too small clothes. "He lost his job," Dad said quietly. "They're behind on their mortgage." I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. "How much does he need?" I asked. Dad named a figure that would clean out my rebuilt savings. I transferred the money that night. 2 weeks later, my company sent me to Chicago for an emergency client meeting. "You're the best presenter we have," my boss insisted. "And honestly, Ellie, you need to get out of town." As I packed, I realized this would be my first time on a plane in 7 years. The company was paying, so at least I could pretend, for 48 hours, that I was someone with a normal life, not drowning in everyone else's needs. I arrived at the airport early, anxiety making my stomach churn. After security, I bought an overpriced coffee and watched travelers rush past, families with excited children, business people with efficient luggage, couples heading off on adventures. And then I saw them. A blonde woman in designer sunglasses herding two teenagers toward first-class check-in. One teen turned, and I recognized Emma's profile from countless Facebook photos. My heart stuttered. What were they doing here? Ryan lived in Portland. I shrank back, afraid of being spotted. Melissa, Ryan's wife, was laughing, her hand on Jake's shoulder. They looked carefree, well-dressed in clothes definitely not from discount stores. The attendant greeted them warmly. "Welcome back, Mrs. Campbell. Returning from your Aspen trip?" Aspen? In September? "Yes, the fall colors were just magnificent this year," Melissa replied, handing over 3 passports. "Fall colors? Aspen? First class?" Just last night, Dad had shown me Ryan's text begging for help with school supplies. I watched as they boarded through priority. Jake pulled out the latest iPhone, a model I couldn't afford, while Emma's wrist glinted with what looked like a real tennis bracelet. The truth I'd been too loyal to see began to crystallize. Either Ryan had been lying about his finances, or Dad had been lying about Ryan's needs. Or both. As I watched my brother's family board their first-class flight wearing designer clothes and flashing expensive electronics, allegedly purchased with my money, something inside me hardened. A lifetime of being the good daughter crystallized into a single, burning question. Had I been played for a fool all along? My presentation in Chicago felt like an out-of-body experience. While my mouth formed words about marketing strategies and quarterly projections, my mind raced through years of financial transactions, tearful phone calls, and guilt-laden dinners. The image of Emma's tennis bracelet glinting under airport lights replayed on loop. "Ellie? Are you with us?" My client's voice snapped me back to reality. "Sorry, family emergency on my mind," I murmured, forcing a smile. That night in my hotel room, I pulled out my laptop and began digging. First, I checked my bank statements for the past 5 years, over $87,000 transferred to Dad and Ryan. Nearly my entire life savings gone. With trembling fingers, I logged into Facebook and scrolled through Ryan's family photos. Though they were evidence hiding in plain sight. Melissa tagged at a spa weekend in Napa Valley 3 months ago. Jake showing off new ski equipment at Christmas. A family vacation to Hawaii last summer, when Ryan had supposedly been unemployed for 2 months. My throat tightened. I'd been eating discount groceries and working 60-hour weeks while they'd been sipping Mai Tais on the beach. But the real bombshell came when I impulsively searched property records. Their house, the one with the mortgage they were supposedly struggling to pay, had been paid off 2 years ago. And there was something else. Dad had purchased a vacation cabin in Vermont 3 years earlier. The same year I depleted my 401k to help with his crushing medical debt. The hotel room spun around me. My entire adult life had been built on lies. I called the airline and changed my return flight. I needed answers. Dad seemed surprised when I showed up at his doorstep a day early. "Ellie, I thought you were back tomorrow." He hugged me, then noticed my expression. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I brushed past him into the living room, the same room where I'd written countless checks to save him from financial ruin. "I saw Ryan's family yesterday," I said flatly. "At the airport. In first class. Coming back from Aspen." Dad went very still, his face unreadable. "Well, I'm sure there's an explanation. Like the explanation for your cabin in Vermont." I cut in. "Or for Ryan's paid-off mortgage?" The color drained from his face. "You've been snooping." "Snooping." My voice rose. "I've been bankrupting myself for years to save you both from financial disasters that never existed." Dad sank into his armchair, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. But instead of shame, I saw calculation in his eyes. "You don't understand family dynamics, Ellie. Ryan has responsibilities. And I don't." I was shouting now. "I've put my entire life on hold. No vacations, no savings, no relationship, barely any friends left. All because you convinced me you needed every spare dollar I had. Ryan has children. Children wearing designer clothes and taking luxury vacations with my money. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd found. You told me they couldn't afford school supplies last week, but here's Jake at a Lakers game 3 days ago. Front row seats. Dad's strategy shifted. His shoulders slumped, and his voice softened. You've always been the strong one, Ellie. The capable one. Ryan, he's different. He needs more help. So you decided to bleed me dry instead? The betrayal cut deeper with each word. You've been stealing from me to fund his lifestyle. Not stealing, Dad corrected quickly. Redistributing within the family. Everything stays in the family. The casual way he justified it made something snap inside me. Call Ryan, I demanded.
Now.
He's probably busy.
Call
him. Reluctantly, Dad pulled out his phone and dialed. He put it on speaker.
Dad.
What's up? Ryan's cheerful voice filled the room. Your sister's here, Dad said carefully. She saw you at the airport, coming back from Aspen. A long pause. Then, oh,
shit.
Yeah. Oh shit is right, I said. Care to explain why I've been sending you money for years while you vacation in Aspen? Another pause. Look, Ellie, it's complicated. Actually, it's very simple, I interrupted. You and Dad have been conning me. We never meant to hurt you, Ryan said, his voice softening into the same placating tone Dad had used moments earlier. It's just that with the kids and all their activities, we needed. You needed? I laughed bitterly. What about what I needed? A life? A future? Security. You're single, Dad interjected. Ryan has a family to support. Those 5 words, you're single, Ryan has family, illuminated everything. In their eyes, my life was worth less. My dreams, my needs, my future, all expendable because I didn't have children. So that's it, I asked quietly. Because I'm single, I don't deserve a life of my own? I exist solely to fund your lifestyles. Don't be dramatic, Ryan said. We're family. We help each other. Except I'm the only one doing the helping, I replied, my voice deadly calm now. And you're the ones enjoying the rewards. I looked at my father, this man I'd sacrificed everything for, and saw a stranger, a manipulator who'd exploited my love and loyalty for years. I'm done, I said simply. Ellie, be reasonable, Dad started. I held up my hand. I've sent my last dollar. Find another cash cow. I quit. As I walked toward the door, Dad called after me. You're being selfish. Ryan has children to raise. As the single one, it's your responsibility to help family. I froze, his words striking me like physical blows. Then I turned slowly to face him one last time. Goodbye, Dad. I walked out, leaving behind not just my father's house, but 7 years of exploitation and lies. The betrayal burned like acid in my veins, but beneath the pain, something new was emerging. Freedom. The taxi ride from Dad's house to my apartment felt surreal, like I was floating outside my body. My phone buzzed incessantly. Dad, then Ryan, then Melissa. I silenced it and stared out the window at the familiar streets that suddenly looked different, as if I were seeing them through new eyes. You okay, miss? The driver caught my gaze in the rearview mirror. Actually, I think I might be, I replied, surprising myself. Back in my cramped apartment, I surveyed the space I'd barely invested in. The second-hand furniture, the patched curtains, the single plate, bowl, and cup that constituted my kitchenware. This wasn't a home. It was a cell I'd constructed around myself, believing I couldn't afford better. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank accounts. After years of supporting Dad and Ryan, my savings stood at a pathetic $843.27. My credit score had tanked from the personal loans I'd taken out to help them. My 401k was practically non-existent. The reality of my financial situation hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't even afford to move into a better apartment, let alone start over somewhere new. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Dad. Ellie, you're overreacting. We need to talk about this like adults. Ryan is very upset. The kids don't understand why their aunt is suddenly acting this way. Call me back. Acting this way? As if I were the irrational one for objecting to years of calculated exploitation? The next morning, I called in sick to work and did something I never allowed myself before. I consulted a financial advisor. Your situation isn't uncommon, Lisa told me after I'd explained everything. Financial abuse within families happens more often than people realize. Abuse. The word landed with an unexpected weight. When someone manipulates, intimidates, or coerces you into giving them money, that's financial abuse, she explained gently. And it sounds like you've experienced it for years. I left her office with a structured plan to rebuild my finances, but more importantly, with validation. What my father and brother had done wasn't normal family support. It was exploitation, pure and simple. That night, Dad showed up at my door unannounced. "You're not answering my calls," he said, pushing past me into the apartment. "That's intentional," I replied, keeping the door open. "I have nothing to say to you." He glanced around my sparse living space, and I saw a flicker of something. Was it shame? Guilt? It disappeared quickly. "Look, I understand you're upset. We should have been more transparent." "Transparent?" I interrupted. "You mean you should have told me up front that I was funding Ryan's luxury lifestyle while I lived like this?" I gestured at my surroundings. Dad sighed heavily, playing the wounded father. "Everyone makes mistakes, Ellie. But we're family. You can't just walk away from family. Watch me." "The kids miss their aunt. Emma's been asking about you." The mention of my niece, the genuine connection I'd thought we had despite the distance, made my chest ache. But then I remembered her wrist glinting with a tennis bracelet I could never afford for myself. "You don't get to use them as emotional leverage anymore," I said. "It's over." Then Ryan called. "Dad says you're having some kind of breakdown." "Not a breakdown. A breakthrough," I corrected. "I'm done being your A2. "Don't be dramatic," he scoffed. "We're family. We need each other." "No, you needed me." Past tense. "You needed my money, my sacrifices, my future, while contributing nothing in return." That's not fair. What wasn't fair was watching your kids board a first-class flight while I can't even afford to fix my leaking roof. What wasn't fair was depleting my retirement fund to pay for your European vacations. The calls and visits continued for weeks. Sometimes pleading, sometimes angry, always manipulative. Dad bringing up Mom. She would be so disappointed in how you're treating the family was a particularly low blow. Then came the financial requests, disguised as emergencies. "Emma needs emergency dental surgery," Ryan texted. I replied with a link to a dental insurance comparison site. "The property taxes are overdue. They'll put a lien on the house," Dad warned. I suggested he look into a reverse mortgage on his secretly owned cabin. Each refusal strengthened my resolve. Each manipulation attempt made the truth clearer. They had never loved me as a daughter or sister, only as a resource to be exploited. The final straw came when Dad showed up at my workplace, creating a scene in the lobby. "My daughter is having a mental health crisis," he told my concerned coworkers. "She needs help. She's not thinking clearly." When security escorted him out, I felt something solidify within me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my autonomy, my right to set boundaries, my worth as a human being. That evening, I drafted 2 emails, one to Dad, one to Ryan, with the same message. I am not having a mental health crisis. I am not confused. I am not being selfish. I am simply refusing to set myself on fire to keep you warm any longer. Do not contact me again. Do not come to my home or workplace. Any further attempts to contact me will be considered harassment. I changed my phone number the next day. I blocked them on social media. I warned the front desk at my apartment building and at work not to allow them entry. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Harder than losing Mom, harder than working 3 jobs, harder than giving up my dreams. Cutting ties with family, even toxic family, felt like amputating a limb. But as weeks passed without their emotional manipulation, without financial emergencies, without guilt trips, I began to breathe more freely. The crushing weight I'd carried for 7 years gradually lifted. For the first time since Mom died, I was making decisions based solely on what I wanted, what I needed, what was good for me. The sensation was foreign, almost dizzying in its newness. I deleted the last voicemail from Dad without listening to it. I was no longer their puppet, their ATM, their safety net. I was just Ellie, and for now, that was enough. 6 months after cutting ties with Dad and Ryan, I sat across from my boss, Janet, trying to keep my expression neutral as she slid a folder across her desk. The Chicago client was impressed with your presentation, despite your personal distractions at the time, she said. They're expanding into the West Coast market and specifically requested you to lead the account. I opened the folder. The salary figure made my breath catch. This would mean relocation to San Francisco, Janet continued. It's a significant step up in responsibility. Are you interested? A year ago, I would have immediately thought of Dad. I would have calculated how this move would affect my ability to help with his bills. I would have felt guilty about moving farther away. Instead, I simply said, yes, absolutely. 2 weeks later, I stood in my empty apartment, my meager possessions already packed into my car. I'd sold or donated the worn furniture, relics of my financially constrained past. Nothing here was worth keeping. San Francisco welcomed me with fog-shrouded hills and salty air. My company-subsidized apartment overlooked the bay, more space than I'd ever allowed myself, with gleaming appliances and floor-to-ceiling windows. On my first night, I stood on the small balcony, watching the lights shimmer on the water, and felt a strange lightness. No one knew where I was. No one could reach me with urgent financial demands. For the first time in my adult life, my paycheck was truly mine. I threw myself into work with an intensity that surprised even me. Without the constant drain of supporting Dad and Ryan, my mind felt sharper, my creativity unleashed. Ideas flowed freely. Strategies crystallized with remarkable clarity. The West Coast expansion exceeded projections within the first quarter, largely due to campaigns I'd developed. You're like a different person, Janet remarked during a video call. Whatever was holding you back before, it's gone. She was right. The constant anxiety, the persistent guilt, the crushing responsibility, all lifted. I worked hard not from desperation, but from genuine passion and ambition. My wardrobe evolved from thrift store finds to carefully curated pieces that made me feel powerful. My haircut no longer came from the $10 discount salon, but from a stylist who understood how to frame my features. These weren't frivolous expenses. They were investments in myself, in the professional image I was building. Each morning, the woman in the mirror looked more confident, more commanding. The promotion to regional marketing director came 9 months later. The salary increase allowed me to finally start rebuilding my retirement fund and establish an emergency savings account. I hired a certified financial planner who helped me create a roadmap to financial recovery. Your situation is unusual, she noted, reviewing my financial history. Most people don't start serious saving and investing in their 30s with zero foundation. I had family obligations, I said simply. Well, you're making up for lost time impressively. On my 34th birthday, I booked a solo trip to Iceland, something I'd dreamed about since college. Standing on a black sand beach with the thundering Atlantic before me, I took a photo of myself smiling, wind whipping my hair. I didn't post it on social media. This moment was mine alone. That same week, I closed on a modest but beautiful condo in Sausalito. As I signed the mortgage papers, I remembered all the times I'd sent money for Ryan's housing crises. Now I had a home of my own, one I'd earned through my own efforts, secured by my own merit. To new beginnings, the realtor said, handing me the keys. I began mentoring younger women in the company, particularly those struggling with work-life balance or financial pressures. Without revealing my own story, I encouraged them to prioritize their financial independence above all else. Never compromise your future security for someone else's comfort, I'd tell them. Build your own oxygen mask before helping others. Professionally, I developed a reputation for brilliance tempered with ruthless efficiency. I didn't work long hours. I worked smart hours. I delegated effectively. I said no to projects that wouldn't advance our strategic goals. My team respected me not because I was nice, but because I was effective. When the CMO position opened at our main competitor, I applied without telling anyone. The interview process was grueling, 6 rounds against formidable candidates with impressive pedigrees. When the offer came, it was nearly double my current salary, with equity options that could set me up for early retirement. Why are they hiring externally for such a senior role? Janet asked when I submitted my resignation. Because they need someone who can transform their business, I replied. And that's what I do now. In my new corner office, with its sweeping views of the city, I hung a single photograph, Mom on her 40th birthday, laughing at something off camera. Not Dad. Not Ryan. Just Mom, who had always believed in my potential. Occasionally, I'd search Ryan's name online, catching glimpses of their lives through public social media posts. Emma was in college now. Jake had graduated high school. Their smiles seemed stiffer, their vacation photos less exotic. I felt nothing, neither satisfaction nor regret. They simply existed in a different universe, one that no longer intersected with mine. 2 years into my CMO role, I was featured in Forbes' 40 Under 40 list. The photo shoot took place in my office, the photographer positioning me against the backdrop of the city I'd conquered. Can we use a prop? Maybe family photos on your desk? He suggested. No, I said firmly. Just me. The article highlighted my marketing innovations, my rapid career trajectory, my mysterious past before San Francisco. I didn't correct the journalist's assumption that I'd always been driven and focused. Let the world believe I'd been born this successful. The truth, that I'd risen from financial abuse and exploitation, was my private fuel. That night, alone in my beautifully appointed home, I raised a glass of champagne to my reflection. Look at us now, I whispered. The woman staring back at me was unrecognizable from the one who discovered her brother's family in first class years ago. This woman stood tall, owned her power, and feared nothing, certainly not the judgment of those who had once controlled her. I had not only survived, I had risen, and I had done it without saying a word to the people who'd once defined my existence. The LinkedIn notification appeared on my phone during a board meeting. You may know Ryan Campbell. I nearly dismissed it, but something made me open the app during the coffee break. There was my brother, his profile photo at least 5 years old, with an updated employment status. Open to work. Curious, I scrolled through his profile. Ryan had held 5 different jobs in the past 3 years, each position less prestigious than the last. His most recent role at a regional sporting goods chain had ended 2 months ago. I closed the app without connecting. But that evening, I found myself digging deeper. Ryan's social media had grown sparse. No more vacation photos or boasts about the twins' accomplishments. What few posts remained showed a family clearly trying to maintain appearances. Melissa still tagged luxury brands in her photos, but the backgrounds had changed from 5-star resorts to their backyard. Emma's college posts mentioned student loans and part-time jobs, concepts that had never touched her privileged upbringing. It wasn't schadenfreude that drove my investigation, but a detached fascination, like watching storm clouds gather over a distant shore. Their house, the one with the paid-off mortgage, was listed for sale, priced well below market value with an urgent banner across the listing. The interior photos revealed rooms half emptied of furniture, walls needing paint, fixtures outdated. Dad's public records were even more revealing. Tax liens. A reverse mortgage on the cabin that had been sold in a distressed sale. Medical billing collection notices filed with the county court. I sat back in my ergonomic office chair, swirling a glass of Cabernet. The empire they'd built with my money had crumbled remarkably quickly without its foundation me. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly I felt nothing. Their problems seemed as distant as a movie playing in another room. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Until the email arrived. Subject: reconnecting from ryan.campbell@gmail.com. Ellie, I hope this reaches you. I've been trying to find a way to contact you for months. I saw your Forbes feature. Congratulations on all your success. I know we parted on bad terms, but family is family. We miss you. Dad misses you. The kids ask about you all the time. Things have been tough lately. I've had some career setbacks, and Melissa and I are going through a rough patch. Emma had to leave her private university because we couldn't afford the tuition anymore. I'm not writing to ask for anything, just to reconnect. Maybe we could have coffee next time you're back east? Hope to hear from you, Ryan. It was so perfectly crafted. The casual mention of my success without acknowledging he'd spent years benefiting from my sacrifice. The vague reference to tough times without taking responsibility. The manipulative mention of the kids. And most tellingly, the claim that he wasn't asking for anything. Yet. I didn't reply. 3 days later, another email appeared. Subject: Dad's health from ryan.campbell@gmail.com. Ellie, I hate to burden you, but Dad's not doing well. Heart problems. The doctor says stress is making it worse. He had to sell the house and move into a small apartment. He doesn't complain, but I know he's struggling. He would never ask, but seeing you would mean the world to him. Ryan. Classic escalation tactics. When gentle guilt doesn't work, bring in the health crisis. I deleted it without responding. The third email came from a different address. Subject: Hello, Aunt Ellie from msc2007@gmail.com. Dear Aunt Ellie, you probably don't remember me very well, but I'm your niece, Emma. I found your work email on your company website. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. Dad and Grandpa don't really talk about what happened between you all, but I'm old enough now to understand that things are complicated. I'm in community college now. I had to leave UCLA when we couldn't afford it anymore. I'm working at a coffee shop to help pay for classes. It's actually okay. I'm learning a lot about responsibility. Grandpa moved into the apartment above our garage after he had to sell his house. He looks at your picture from Mom's wedding album sometimes. He seems sad. I don't want anything from you. I just thought you should know that things have changed a lot for us. Maybe people can change too? Love, Emma. This one nearly broke my resolve. I remembered Emma as a child, her excitement over that European trip I'd unknowingly funded. Was she an innocent bystander in all this, or another manipulator in training? The email struck me as suspiciously mature and insightful for a 19-year-old, or perhaps that was my cynicism speaking. I moved it to a folder without responding, but couldn't quite delete it. 2 weeks later, my executive assistant forwarded a message. This came through the company's general inquiry form. The sender is pretty persistent. Third attempt this week. From W. Campbell at Eastlink. Net subject: Urgent family matter. To whom it may concern. I'm trying to reach my daughter, Eleanor Campbell. This is an urgent family matter. I am her father, William Campbell. Please have her contact me as soon as possible at this email or 555-721-4302. Thank you, William Campbell. The familiar manipulation tactics were becoming almost comical. When emails didn't work, try the company. When personal pleas fail, claim an emergency. Flag any further messages from these addresses as spam, I told my assistant. That evening, scrolling through real estate listings, I was considering a vacation property in Napa. An unfamiliar number called. Against my better judgment, I answered. Eleanor Campbell? A woman's voice, professional but warm. Speaking. This is Diane Mercer from Bay Area Community College. I'm calling because your father, William Campbell, has listed you as his emergency contact on his application for our senior education program. He's collapsed during orientation and been taken to Memorial Hospital. He's asking for you. My heart stuttered for a moment before a rational thought kicked in. Dad had never set foot in California. He didn't know where I lived. This was just another escalation, more creative than most. I'm afraid there's been a mistake, I replied. My father lives on the East Coast and has never been to San Francisco. A pause.
Oh, dear.
He showed identification. I should notify security. You should. I agreed before hanging up. I changed my number the next day. 2 months passed without contact. I was finalizing a major acquisition when my new assistant knocked on my door. There's a Ryan Campbell in reception insisting on seeing you. Security has already asked him to leave twice. So they'd escalated to in-person confrontation. A chill ran down my spine, followed by a wave of anger. How dare they invade my carefully constructed new life? Call security again, I instructed. If he returns, have him arrested for trespassing. Through the glass walls of my office, I watched as security escorted my brother from the building. Even from a distance, I could see how much he'd aged, his shoulders slumped, hair thinning, the designer clothes replaced by an off-the-rack suit that hung poorly on his frame. For the first time since I'd walked away, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Not because he was suffering, but because the natural consequences of his actions had finally caught up with him. Without my money to fund their lifestyle, without my sacrifice to shield them from reality, they'd had to face what they'd created. Their perfect world had crumbled under the weight of its own artifice. And I hadn't had to lift a finger to make it happen. Karma, it seemed, didn't need my help at all. The invitation to speak at the National Marketing Association's annual conference arrived on a Tuesday. The event would be held in Boston, just an hour from my hometown. I'd avoided the East Coast for 5 years, building my new life safely across the country from my past. But this was a career-defining opportunity one couldn't refuse. Ms. Campbell, your car is waiting. The hotel concierge's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I smoothed my designer suit, Armani, purchased without a second thought about the price, and headed for the door. My keynote speech received a standing ovation. As attendees crowded around afterward with business cards and praise, a hotel staff member approached. "Excuse me, Ms. Campbell. There's someone insisting on speaking with you. He claims he's your father." My blood froze. "Where?" "In the lobby. Security is with him." I should have walked the other way. Should have exited through the service entrance. Should have protected the sanctuary I'd built. Instead, I said, "Tell security I'll be right there." 5 years of silence, of rebuilding, of healing, and still my heart raced at the thought of seeing him again. Dad sat hunched on a bench near the entrance, a security guard hovering nearby. The immaculate suit and confident posture I remembered had been replaced by bargain store clothes and stooped shoulders. His hair had gone completely white. When he spotted me, he stood shakily. "Ellie." "Mr. Campbell," I corrected, maintaining a professional distance. "How did you know I'd be here? Your picture was in the conference brochure." His voice trembled slightly. "I've been following your career from a distance. I'm proud of you." The words I'd once longed to hear now rang hollow. "What do you want?" He gestured to a nearby seating area. "Could we talk? Please." Professional curiosity, more than emotional attachment, made me nod. I turned to the security guard. "It's fine. I'll signal if I need assistance." We sat across from each other, strangers connected by blood and betrayal. "Ryan's house went into foreclosure last month," he said without preamble. "Melissa left him, took the kids to her parents in Florida." I remained expressionless, waiting. "I'm living in a studio apartment now. Social Security doesn't stretch far." He attempted a self-deprecating smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Quite a change from the life you remember. Why are you telling me this?" He leaned forward, desperation seeping through his carefully composed facade. "I need help, Ellie. Just until I get back on my feet. Alone. I'll pay it back, I swear." So there it was. The years might change the packaging, but the request remained the same. "No," I said simply. "But the answer is no." His face hardened, the mask slipping to reveal the manipulator beneath. "Ryan has children to raise. Emma had to drop out of college. Jake can't afford his medication." "You're being selfish," I replied, echoing his words from years ago. "Ryan has children to raise. It's your responsibility to figure it out." The color drained from his face as he recognized his own cruel dismissal thrown back at him. "The difference," I continued calmly, "is that I'm not preventing you from solving your own problems. I'm simply refusing to be the solution." "We're family," he insisted, a note of anger creeping into his voice.
No.
"We're genetically related individuals who once shared a household. Family doesn't exploit each other. Family doesn't lie, manipulate, or steal. I never stole. You stole my 20s. My financial security. My trust. I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. Those things can never be repaid. Desperation replaced anger. Please, Ellie. I have nowhere else to turn. That sounds like a personal problem. I adjusted my designer watch, a gift to myself after a particularly successful quarter. I need to return to the conference. Wait. He clutched my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. What happened to you? You used to be so caring, so giving. I gently but firmly removed his hand. I learned to care for myself. I learned that giving shouldn't leave you empty. I met his gaze directly. I learned from your example, just not the lesson you intended to teach. As I turned to leave, he called after me. What am I supposed to do now? I paused, then looked back. That's not my concern anymore. Walking away, I felt no triumph, no vindication, just the quiet certainty that I had finally closed the door on a painful chapter of my life. That evening, I upgraded my return flight to first class. As I settled into the plush seat, glass of champagne in hand, a family boarded, parents guiding two teenagers towards seats across the aisle. For a moment, I was transported back to that fateful day at the Chicago airport when I'd first glimpsed the truth behind years of lies. But this time, I wasn't the one watching in shock and betrayal. I was the one whose success was earned, whose luxury was deserved. The flight attendant leaned down. Is everything satisfactory, Miss Campbell? Perfect, I replied, and meant it. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant confirming tomorrow's executive board meeting. Beyond it, I could see 3 unread emails from Ryan and 1 from Dad, digital ghosts I would never acknowledge. As the plane lifted into the clouds, I gazed out the window at the receding landscape of my past. The ultimate revenge wasn't confrontation or retaliation. It wasn't even the satisfaction of watching them struggle while I thrived. The ultimate revenge was freedom from their manipulation, from misplaced guilt, from the narrative they'd written for me. I took another sip of champagne, savoring its crisp perfection. Let them search for another willing victim. Let them blame me for their downfall. Let them comfort themselves with stories of my selfishness and cruelty. None of it could touch me anymore. I had won, not by destroying them, but by refusing to let them destroy me. And that victory was sweeter than any revenge could ever be.